Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last week we spoke about his business ethics, his ability to do business in the modern economy. That is Mr. Rob Hersov. On tonight's episode, we're going to be discussing politics, the current energy crisis in South Africa, and what is the way going forward with regards to heading into 2024. Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Talking Point Show on Hilaal TV channel 347. My name is Farhaaz Patel. Our guest today is our guest from last week, Mr. Rob Hersov, entrepreneur and businessman. Last week we spoke about business, his philosophy, and of course the future of economies in South Africa and across the continent. Tonight we're talking about politics. We're talking about the future of South Africa. We're talking the SOE, the energy crisis that is currently plaguing our country right here. Rob, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us again. We really appreciate it.
Faraz, nice to be back. I enjoyed last week, and I think I'm wearing the same shirt as last week. Sorry about that.
Well, listen, as long as the conversation is fruitful, we don't mind what shirt you wear, Mr. Rob. Rob, let's get into it. Load shedding. It's affecting us so badly. We see the economy really taking a strain on what is currently happening. How bad is the crisis within our country?
It's an embarrassment and it's a disgrace. This is a country that has incredible human resources, incredible natural resources. We have dams, we have gas, we have everything imaginable. And yet we have the worst government on the continent, and they have destroyed this economy. And the biggest manifestation of that destruction is not South African Airways, which is dead, Denel dead, Transnet about to die. It's Eskom. And the ANC is 100% responsible for what has happened and load shedding. And the ANC is going to be out of power in 2024 as a result, as they deserve to be.
Rob, this week, of course, is the State of the Nation address that's going to happen. I mean, when you talk to citizens, it's the same promises that have been given to South Africans, and not many have been fulfilled. Maybe not all have been fulfilled. We're currently in a national state of disaster with regards to the electricity crisis. Does it really make a difference?
Electricity drives our economy. Children can't be educated, businesses can't survive, produce is being thrown away, everything falls apart. If you put all our troubles of South Africa in a pile over here and Eskom over here, Eskom will bring this country down. And Cyril Ramaphosa is responsible. He is the president that let the lights go out. He's a disgrace. We must get rid of him, and we've got to get rid of the ANC or we're doomed. And if any of your viewers are still voting ANC, you are part of the problem.
Rob, President Cyril Ramaphosa, when he came in, I mean, there's the term the 9 wasted years. When he came in, he was seen as the anti-corruption crusader. Obviously, COVID-19 came in, and we still saw so many problems happening within South Africa, within his own administration. We thought that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry would have supposedly changed all of that. What has gone wrong in his presidency?
He's a coward. He's spineless, and he's never been a businessman. You got handed things on a plate. The man is fundamentally useless, pathetic, and has no spine. Have a look at his cabinet. Look at the monsters, clowns, communist cadres, and incompetence on his cabinet. I mean, Becky Cele, useless. Gwede Mantashe, communist. I can go on. Naledi Pandor, I mean, how pathetic is she? And I spoke highly of her. She's now glad-handing the Russians. He should have replaced tons of those people by now. Fikile and Balula should have been gone. And yet, he keeps them on his cabinet. It means he has no power, no spine, and no courage whatsoever. So, Zuma was horrific. Cyril is just as bad. These people are going to go down in the history of South Africa as enormous disasters that have destroyed democracy, our economy, and the livelihoods and future of a lot of our people.
Would you say, Rob, that this is the problem maybe with liberation movement, is that you can do all you can to, of course, fight oppressive systems, which was, of course, apartheid. But then at the same time, when you get into power, maybe there isn't the lack of, or I would say the lack of leadership that they probably have, because you're taking a country into a transition, and for the last 29 years, there really hasn't been any improvement. And I'm going to talk specifically about, the underprivileged South Africans who still till today can't get the basic services in their area.
So true. I mean, to be fair to the ANC, from 1994 to 2004, we had economic growth, employment increased massively. We had, the right decisions being made on investment, state-owned enterprises. And that was mainly because Nelson Mandela overrode the mandate of the ANC, was basically a socialist Soviet doctrine. And he overrode it. He had the power of personality to say, let's leave these Indians, coloreds, white guys, all competent people in positions of importance. Let's leave them there to get the job done. Let's let them get on with it. And when he left, Mbeki did a pretty good job, but then the rot set in. And you know what happens with liberation movements? They confuse luck with genius. And they think that now is their time to steal. And what happens is we've got 452 days left to the 2024 election. And the people who haven't stolen enough, which is most of the ANC leadership, are trying to steal everything they can because they know they're out of power. And Cyril's so pathetic, he can't do anything about it. Fortunately, we won't turn into Venezuela or Zimbabwe because the people of South Africa are starting to revolt against the ANC and are going to throw the ANC out of power. If we had an election today, just in the urban areas, the ANC is below 30%. And what happens is the people you mentioned, the impoverished people who were impoverished in 1994, are actually in a worse position today because services aren't being provided. I mean, at least under the terrible apartheid regime, Eskom worked, South African Airways worked, Transnet worked. At least those things worked. And I know there was a complete imbalance of who benefited. But today, the ANC's impoverished the whole country. And they are evil, fundamentally evil.
Rob, before we go to the break, there was a video I saw last week, the perception of the ANC's before elections or months into the elections, they hand out food parcels, which has been the one way of obviously winning over the voters. But if I'm not mistaken, it was in the Northwest or Limpopo. The ANC went with a food parcel and a very old lady told him to get out. Surely that's a sign, isn't it, that even in the rural areas where, historically they didn't have social media or, TV to, see what is currently happening in the country, they're now awakening to it, haven't they? To finally realize that there's so much more out there than just the ANC as a political party.
So true. Load shedding is going to be alone the thing that brings the ANC down. Because even the poorest people, the most desperate people who have been bribed by the ANC with a T-shirt and a chicken meal once a year or once every 4 years, they know they're being bribed. They know it. They're desperate, so they take the grant, they take the chicken, they take the T-shirt because they're in desperate situation. But they know there's a better option. And they know the ANC has let them down. I think the ANC is finished, doomed, as it deserves to be.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Mr. Rob Hersov. We're talking specifically the energy crisis because we heard Eskom a couple of weeks ago saying for the next few years it's stage 2 and 3. But what is the way forward with regards to having sustainable energy in South Africa? Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. This is episode 2 with businessman and entrepreneur Mr. Rob Hersov. We are discussing politics, the energy crisis, and the future of South Africa heading into the 2024 elections. Rob, the energy crisis. Now, there's of course talks of the renewables. There's of course talks of maintaining coal. There's talks of gas. Where are we in terms of the light at the end of the tunnel for the energy crisis right now? Because we've seen breakdowns upon breakdowns on various of the power stations, which of course are leading to the energy crisis. What is the way forward?
So the enemy of South Africa are the ANC that has created load shedding, the international greenies who've been funded by people like George Soros coming down here to force South Africa to be dependent on international renewable energy technology and international loans, and the local lobbies, plus some, farmers in Graafrenet and around there, who, just have a NIMBY approach and not in my backyard approach to mining what is below our feet. We need to be energy independent and we need to have energy sovereignty as South Africa. So let's use our coal. Let's look for gas to turn into power. And we have massive shale deposits under the central Peru. And we can become energy independent very quickly. We should also be looking at small modular nuclear reactors. The only problem with these three things, and I seem to be on the same page as Gwede Mantashe here, is, Gwede being a communist, he just wants the government to do it all, which means they're just going to steal, If you pay 200 million euros for a small modular reactor, the ANC is going to try and steal as much of it as possible. But if you let the private sector do it, and the money's there, it will be done efficiently, and we can get to energy independence and sovereignty very quickly. We just got to get the government out of the way.
What is holding back these things, Rob? Because I want to look at coal. Mpumalanga, of course, is such a massive province in agriculture, in mining, but most importantly, coal, because it's the coal from Mpumalanga that powers the power stations. So why is there a block for coal to be still maintained and sustained to allow this to happen?
So we've got incredible and unlimited high-yield coal. Our exports to Europe have been up 700%. Europe's buying our coal. All the greenies, like coal's bad for the environment. Europe's buying our coal again for their coal-fired plants. They're reopening nuclear plants. So why can't we do it? The reason why is Eskom, the ANC, controls the whole process. So the ANC government built two of the biggest coal-fired plants in the world. They're supposed to be operational 10 years ago. They still don't work. If you leave these projects to the ANC and to the government, they're going to stuff them up. They're going to steal the money and nothing will work. We've got to get the government out, get the ANC out of the way. We need all your viewers to vote for change urgently. And we really need people to register and vote. A lot of 55% of South Africans aren't even voting, which just gives the ANC more chance to stay in and vote for change. There's private sector money, there's private sector expertise, and there's huge energy power, ability in this country to solve load shedding. We just got to get the ANC out of the way.
Rob, you speak of nuclear, we speak of gas. 2 weeks ago, I had a guest speaking about nuclear and how nuclear is being used effectively within the Middle Eastern states to make sure that they have sustainable energy and they really do have a consistent energy. So how do we work around the nuclear? Because Koeberg is a classic example of nuclear, and I mean, can that be transcended into the other power stations within South Africa?
Yes, nuclear is the answer. If we had 5 more Koebergs, like France has done, France has kept nuclear as a massive contributor to their electricity. And then the greenies have sort of scared the Germans out of nuclear. But it's swinging. The greenies have been shown to be the con men of the century. What the greenies are saying, indoctrinating our children with polar bears dying. We need to say to the greenies, stuff off. We need energy independence. You want to protect the economy. We believe in doing that. We believe in protecting the environment. But we need to use what we have under our feet to power our electricity, to give our children a future. And people can't afford petrol. They can't afford, no one can't keep the lights on. And yet we've got to listen to these greenies funded from overseas telling us what to do. No, end of those people.
Rob,
let's focus on ourselves.
Rob, but would you say that maybe in the future, renewables may be the way to go? But obviously,
Yes.
governance and making sure that there's regulations with regards to it, because that's important. If the renewables can be kept within South Africa, I mean, that would be important, isn't it, to make sure that if there is going to be renewable farms, wind, solar, battery powered, that it's in South Africa, made by the South Africans.
100%, and it's easily done. So I'm not against renewables. I'm actually for renewables, but the renewable crowd do lie to us. They say, well, solar and wind is so much cheaper than all the other power supply. That's a lie. We're not there yet, but we're heading there. What we need to do is, as America intelligently did, bridge the gap. And how do we bridge the next 10 to 15 years with baseload power that will allow the renewable energy providers to then increase their part of the mix? And I support that, by the way. We do that, nuclear and gas. We need to start drilling in the central Karoo. We need Gweda Mantashe to lift the moratorium on gas to power, fracking. And we're ready. Tons of people are ready to come in, drill for gas, and produce gas to power. Why do we have a moratorium that the greenies forced upon us? Gwede, lift the moratorium today.
And environmentalists, Rob, are they hindrance, or do they have some sort of how do I put it this way, justification to why fossil fuels cannot be used?
We produce 2% of the world's carbon, 2%, and yet we are restricting ourselves to an international standard. And that international standard has been set by countries that for 100 years have been using coal and fossil fuels to power their economy. Now, all of a sudden, we're not allowed to do it. We have to accept their standards. They should be paying us for us to use our coal and gas as a punishment that they deserve. So it's just not fair. I mean, we're just dancing to an international, mainly greeny and environmentally funded nonsense. Really is unfair and wrong. So I think the shoe's on the other foot now. I think the greenies are on the retreat. Even the international greenies funding the nonsense in South Africa are on the back foot because people want electricity. We need it. We're desperate.
Rob, one final question before we end the segment. The ANC 2 weeks ago said that they have a plan to end load shedding by the end of the year. Is that a reasonable plan, or are we living in a fantasy world?
The ANC are idiots. They are idiots. Go back 5 years, 4 years, 3 years. Cyril announces we have a plan to end load shedding. They created load shedding. The ANC created load shedding. They are responsible for it. They have no plan to fix it. They have no plan to fix anything. They are the reason we are in this problem. So people who are voting ANC, stop immediately and vote for change. And for those people who decided not to vote because they're sick of the ANC, take the next step, vote for someone else. You have to do it this time, or we're finished in 2024.
And that'll be, of course, our topic for the next segment. What is the way forward politically for South Africa? Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. This is episode 2 with Mr. Rob Hersov. Rob, let's talk leadership. We as South Africans right now, we are craving ethical leadership. How do we change the minds of citizens to make sure that they can help produce ethical leadership away from the ANC dependency? Because everyone believes that it's only the ANC that can run South Africa. But, how do we create that ethical leadership that us as South Africans are striving for?
So just take, for one example, the Democratic Alliance. They've been, in Cape Town, won Cape Town in 1994 when the ANC won everything else. They then won the rest of the Western Province, and then they started to win metros all over the country. And take one little example of Nguni Province and a very young, Zulu-speaking, red-headed South African called Chris Pappas.
Yes.
And look what he's done in a year in power. He won by 46 votes, or some absolute tiny, minuscule margin. He has removed debt. He has done a huge amount of municipal work, and he's proven that with ethical leadership, focus, and good governance, you can get it done. And that's the Democratic Alliance. So the ANC has been trying to brand the Democratic Alliance as a white party or party for the rich. Well, even if that's true, they're a hell of a lot better than the ANC ever will be. But they're not. There's a huge number of all races, creeds, and colors in the Democratic Alliance. And every day, thousands of people in the Democratic Alliance are working for the good of South Africa on behalf of all South Africans. So just start there and then go and have a look at, Inkatha, Action SA, ACDP, COPE, Patriotic Alliance, VF Plus. These are very good options. If you vote for any of those, you're voting for change, because ultimately they'll come together in a coalition to replace the monstrous ANC.
And that's it, isn't it, Rob? That we want to have a government that is corruption-free, that can solve the issues. But let's look in 2024. Let's just say we have the ANC voted out of power. How long, what would be the patience level that South Africans would want to make sure that that rebuilding of South Africa is done? Because each and every person just wants a safe country to be in, and a country where they can help contribute to the economy and do it with a smile on their face.
So South Africa is going to take 10 years to fix. Why do I say 10 years? Because, it takes 10 years to build a business from scratch, a successful business. You get lucky and do it quicker, or you fail. But it takes 10 years to build a very good, sustainable business. The ANC has managed to destroy every single state-owned enterprise. They're all going to have to be fixed or replaced. And the best way to replace them is to privatize. There is an enormous amount of foreign direct investment ready to come into this country if we get rid of the monsters of the ANC. The minute the ANC is gone and not replaced by the idiot racists like the EFF, the coalition will attract a huge amount of foreign direct investment, which will be used to fix electricity supply, to fix Transnet, and to privatize all these state-owned enterprises, which are just a hotbed for corruption. It can be fixed, but it'll take time. And you asked a very good question. You said, what patience will people have? Well, I think there's some very quick fixes that'll happen. Education is going to take a generation. That's a hard one. We have a whole generation of undereducated or uneducated people in South Africa who we're going to have to look after. But electricity supply, we can fix quickly. Transnet can be fixed relatively quickly. Crime, very quickly. If you get a clown like Becky Cele out of power and you put a guy like Ian Cameron in, the police, there's some very good people within the police, but monsters managing it. You get rid of the monsters, the people will rise to the top, the good people. And in South Africa, for every position that is being held by an ANC cadre, and the Zondo Commission has pointed them out by name. So we get rid of those people, put competent people back in, things start turning relatively quickly. But they're going to have to do quick fixes fast to stay in power, the coalition, because otherwise the ANC, who've left such a disaster, will say, look, these guys can't fix it, vote us back in. And we mustn't do that.
Rob, before we close this segment, coalition governments, it's such a complicating animal, and I put it in inverted commas because you don't know what you're going to get from the council settings from various of the metros. We saw, of course, 2 weeks ago, Dr. Mpopalatsi being voted out from her seat as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg. Can coalition governments work on a national level? As a South African citizen, are you confident that, should there be a coalition government in 2024, it can strive in the right direction?
100%. Coalition governments operate successfully all over the world. Look at Sweden, look at Israel, look at Germany. Corné Mulder, who's a very impressive man who runs the Western Cape for the VF Plus, went and spent 2 weeks in Europe studying coalitions. And, he took a number of people with him and he's brought his findings back. He'd be a great guy to interview on this, by the way. And you should interview Mark Gordon on energy. Those two terrific people, smarter than me. But coalitions can work, and they will work in South Africa. And I have no doubt that whomever is president is going to be actually less relevant to us going forward. What will be more important is having the best Minister of Energy in that position, the best Minister of Police in that position. Today, we have just complete idiots as ministers. I mean, really are idiots. They don't know anything about the sector, and they're just letting their friends steal our country blind. So the coalition, even in its worst form, will be better than the ANC today.
After the break, when we started last week's episode, Rob said, I am staying. We're going to find out why he's staying and why other South Africans should follow that lead to make sure that they can build a better country for themselves. Do stay tuned to Talking Point. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Talking Point. It's been a great marathon. 8 segments, 1.5 hour discussion with Mr. Rob Hersov, and we come to that final segment. Rob, you mentioned last week when we started the interview that I am staying. Hashtag I am staying. It's become a hashtag that has been said amongst many South Africans. A man obviously of your status would have said, I'm done with the country. I'm going to go overseas. I'll take my investment elsewhere. Why do you believe so much in South Africa and the good people that it has and the change that can happen?
You know, I've lived overseas 31 years. I came back briefly because I thought it was the end of the country under Zuma. And now my wife, New Zealand born, and 2 of my younger kids, we've decided we're going to stay. There is no better country in the world. This country has it all. It has the greatest people. It has the best sense of humor. It's just, there's nothing beats this country. Tell you what, I've been everywhere else. This is it. Greatest country in the world. And I believe I can help save it. I really believe I have a role in life. It's cost me, by the way, a lot of friends and a lot of money taking the stand. And I've also had death threats. I've had a lot of nastiness sent against me. But you know what? I'm going to keep going and I'm not going to give up. I don't care and I'm not afraid. And I want more people to feel the same way. I don't blame people for leaving. But for those who stay, please show the courage and stand up and call out the ANC for their gangsterism, corruption, and incompetence. And I especially say this to the big business community, who are the silence of the lambs. Do you hear any of the big business people saying anything? The only person brave enough to do it was Johan Rupert, 2015 to 2017, and he got pilloried for it. We should thank him for his bravery and courage. But today, no one, other than Neil Froneman, is speaking out. And it's embarrassing. Where's big business? Can't hear them.
You know, Rob, you mentioned something important and something great about South Africa, because we've got the beautiful oceans of Cape Town, lovely Table Mountain, we've got Kruger National Park, you know, we've got a beautiful industrial and economic city like Johannesburg. When we talk of sports, I mean, our love for sports as South Africans is massive. Springboks, Bafana, I mean, even if Bafana are not doing well, we've got the Proteas, we've got, you know, so much that is riding on us. You talk of sense of humor, we've got such a beautiful democracy. How do we make sure that with all of that, we can derive the ethical leadership that us as South Africans truly deserve?
We need people to have the courage to register and vote for change. There is no other way around it. You know, I've put newsouthafrica.org together as a blockchain-based, decentralized, autonomous organization, which over time will provide governance without government. But for the time being, we have a constitutional democracy and everyone has to vote. And we have an obligation to get everyone to register, to vote in 2024 and to vote for change. If we do that, we rid ourselves of this unethical behavior of the ANC, this disastrous government we have, this disastrous party, the ANC, and we will change this country and turn it around. But if the ANC get in again in 2024, it's over. It's over.
2024. The elections, of course, will be happening April or May. How important...
May the 1st.
May the 1st.
May the 1st.
May the 1st. Come May the 1st, Rob, how big does this change the destiny of South Africa and the trajectory this country is going to take? Because after this, there may just be no going back.
You said it better than I did there. If the ANC are booted out and sent back to the pits of hell where they deserve, and a coalition comes in, this country's economy will lift on the next day. The rand is going to strengthen, foreign investment will pour in, people will start to, return to South Africa. We would have extraordinary young South Africans trained abroad, contact-based, even made money, returning to South Africa who want to be part of rebuilding this country. I mean, you'll feel it. It'll be like a breath of fresh air, burst of energy. And this country will move forward on day one. And I think very quickly, our economic growth will outstrip our population growth. At the moment, our economic growth is below population growth, which means everyone's getting poorer by the day. But if we rid ourselves of the ANC in 2024, you're going to see this country take off very quickly.
And I think that's all what we as South Africans want, to have a healthy and functional economy. Rob, I'd like to say thank you so much for giving us your time for this last 2 weeks. It's been a great conversation. It's been great to hear, obviously, from the business side to the political side. And here at Hilaal TV, we'd like to say thank you so much for giving us your time for the last 1.5 hours. We really do appreciate it.
And if I may say, what an honor it has to be on your show. Your community has been a major contributor to bringing down apartheid, a major contributor above and beyond to the economy, and good, decent people. And I thank you all. It's been an honor to be here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much. And I think, in the words of our Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, he's always said that your contribution towards your economy makes you a better human being. And we as Muslims do our best to really follow his example. And we thank you again, Rob, for those kind words towards the Muslim community.
It's a great honor. Thank you.
Now, there we go. That's been the marathon with Mr. Rob Hersov, entrepreneur and businessman, talking to us. Last week, of course, business and its philosophy. Of course, this week, we spoke about the future of South Africa, the politics, and of course, energy crisis, load shedding, and just what we South Africans can do to play our part in allowing there to be a functional economy and a beautiful country to live for. From myself, Farhaaz Patel, and the rest of the team, we'd like to say Jazakallah to you for allowing us onto your television screens. We'll be again here, same time, same place next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.